I'm calling this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We're rocking and rolling.
So before they were like doing this like.
Before we begin, I want to remind everybody, if you have a cell phone, please turn it off or put it on vibrate so that we don't have any interruption during our meeting. I'm going to establish a quorum. We have 5 commissioners here, missing our Commissioner Brezak? Bresak, and Commissioner Moisen. Is there any comments? I have 2 comment cards. If anybody's going to give comments, to anything that's not on the agenda, now is the time. I have a comment from Randy, who's our BPAC representative, which is probably just going to say that. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Randy Cree. I'm here on assignment, I guess, from BPAC. I observe and take anything back to BPAC that we meet later this month, next week. If there's any questions or anything, I'm just sitting in the back. There was one item on your agenda that we reviewed back in March. This is the Dragers issue. But I think all of the information that we wanted in part has been passed to you by staff.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for attending. So I'm going to close public comment for everything not on the agenda. Next, I'll move on to the consent calendar, which is the commission meetings minutes from May 7th.
Do we have minutes?
Well, they were sent via email, but I don't think they're in our packet, right?
I haven't.
They were sent via email.
Okay.
David sent them.
Do you have
Nope.
anybody have any corrections?
Nope.
I didn't read them, and they got missed in the process. So
So
I'm
what
not
do you
going to be
wanna do?
qualified to,
Then you can abstain.
unless staff
You can
has a copy they can share with me now.
Let's see.
I can
Probably
give you.
postpone it
Here,
for
John.
next week.
Here you go.
What?
This is just like the modern era. It's in the 2000s now.
Would you hand me a copy? Yes.
Do we want to take a moment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we take a moment?
Sure.
We want to go back
One
to it?
commissioner who,
I don't know.
I don't know. Do you want to do it all and postpone it?
Let him look at it for a
Let
second.
him look at it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
It was in the package.
It was in-
Downloaded.
Are there glasses?
Are there glasses? Yes, they're over there. So we're taking a moment to review the minutes. Could I have a glass of water while you're waiting?
Okay, so I have only one comment, which was I was opposed to the project because we failed to provide screening. It was
The solar,
the solar energy, item number 2. It was my vote not to approve it was because we were not screening the project consistent with what we were planning to provide. It was not on the height.
so do you guys have that correction?
If you could make that correction, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
All right?
Any other corrections?
Rooney?
No.
Pass them.
I don't get to keep this?
No.
You don't ask, they never offer.
Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes as
Yeah,
they
I move-
are with the correction?
I move that we approve the minutes of the April 16th meeting
As amended.
As amended.
as amended
Second.
by Commissioner Barron.
And seconded by Commissioner Barrett. All those in favor, or is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the public hearing part of our meeting, and the only item that we have is the 14-D03, 14-UP04, 14-V15, and 14Z01, the field, and I'm going to Pioli, is that who, architects, 342, 366 First Street. First up is the staff report.
Yes, good evening, Chair, members of the Commission, Zach Dahl, Senior Planner. This item before you has multiple components. We are looking at a design review for an addition of approximately 3,000 square feet to an existing 21,000 square foot grocery store. We are looking at a zoning map amendment to rezone the parcel at 366 First Street. This is the former dry cleaners building behind Draeger's to the south. This is currently designated as CDR3, but since the project is seeking to merge the properties together, staff is recommending that the property be rezoned to CRS, so you have the entire property zoned with the same zone designation and avoid any split zoning. We are also looking at a variance to recognize the existing grocery store and parking lot. In this case, the parking lot has a total of 72 on-site spaces where a total of 107 are required. This configuration for reduced parking was originally approved by a variance back in 1978, and so staff is recommending that the Commission approve a variance to continue to recognize the situation here. The new addition of approximately 3,000 square feet is providing 15 new parking spaces, which does meet the city's current zoning requirements for parking, which is 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And we are also looking at a use permit to allow for a commercial building that is over 7,000 square feet. In this case, we are looking at a grocery store that will be a total of approximately 24,000 square feet. So you have 4 applications bundled into this application tonight. I'm going to take you through a few slides to get you familiar with the site, and then also we can discuss in more detail after I'm done with my presentation if you have additional questions. The project site is located between Foothill Expressway and First Street, just south of the former train station. You can see the site highlighted there. It does consist of 3 parcels, which, if the project is approved, will be merged into one. Right here you can see the zoning. The 2 parcels for the existing grocery store are CRS, and the former dry cleaner parcel at 366 is CDR3, so that parcel would be rezoned. You can see the surrounding zonings. So the rezoning would be consistent with the pattern in the downtown. Right here, we do have an aerial of the supermarket. You can see the existing parking configuration with 60-degree parking and a one-way loop driveway. The new driveway, one of the improvements here, there are several improvements that will improve vehicle and pedestrian circulation. They are moving the driveway to be further away from the store entrance. This will improve both vehicle circulation as well as remove the conflict between pedestrians and vehicles entering and exiting the store. To realign the mid-block crosswalk with their new entry, it will be slid north up First Street by approximately 45 feet, so you can see the existing and proposed location. I'll touch on this more in a moment. There are 5 existing loading zone spaces along the Draeger's store frontage. There will be, staff is recommending that 3 new loading zone spaces be designated south of the Whitney First Street intersection. And right here we have the new loading bay, loading dock driveway. This will be a significant improvement over what currently exists. The improvements include a full-depth loading bay that will allow for the semi-trucks to fully park onto the site. Right now, they either park along the street or have to stick out into the street, and obviously creates a significant circulation issue. So this will be a big improvement over the current condition. Here's a street view. You can see the existing mid-block crosswalk, and here's the proposed location. It will come in. It'll cross the street and kind of hit right between the dry cleaners and the jewelry store there on the opposite side. Here's a view looking down. Another big improvement that the project is proposing will be to separate, create a green wall separation between the sidewalk on First Street and the new parking lot configuration. As you can see right here, cars often nose over and really narrow down the sidewalk. So this will be a significant improvement for pedestrians using First Street. The project will be improving the entire frontage of First Street with concrete sidewalks, bulb outs at the crosswalks and the driveway to improve pedestrian safety, and a vertical green wall to ensure that situations like this no longer occur. So you'll no longer have cars crossing over into the public sidewalk. Along here, this is the existing store. They are proposing improvements with stone facade to improve the appearance and kind of bring more rhythm to the building. The slump stone will be maintained on the inner walls, but the pilasters and the corner elements will receive a new stone facade, and that material sample is being passed around right now. This is the loading zone that I mentioned earlier. Right now, it is a loading zone from 5 to 11 in the morning, and then it reverts to 2-hour parking for the rest of, or from there till 6, and it's otherwise available to the public. This is the rear of the building right now with a 6 or 7 foot chain link fence. So this area will be significantly improved. Taller wood fences will screen the loading bay, so you'll get a much better interface with the loading and mechanical activities in the rear fully screened. Another view here. The driveway to the loading bay will center approximately on where that yellow pole is in the photo. Staff is recommending one condition that was not included in the staff report, which right now, since there are 5 existing loading spaces, staff is recommending that 3 new loading spaces be striped to maintain the existing activity and to provide for small, mid-size, and smaller delivery trucks to enter and exit the site and have space available. Looking at the proposed site plan, these are the 3 spaces. Staff is recommending that only 3 new ones rather than the existing 5 be restriped. One is for the new configuration. The traffic engineer noted that it would create a potential visibility issue for pedestrians if there are loading trucks always parked on both sides of the sidewalk at Whitney. Also, for the time period from 5 to 11, this isn't a high-demand parking period along First Street, and so there is ample public parking available along the street, and the loading zone isn't the only place that trucks can park. This just delineates free parking available. So staff's recommendation is that only 3 be restriped, but there'll still be ample parking along the street for trucks if those spaces are full. But it would result in 2 additional fully available public spaces along First Street. Also, as noted, even with the reconfiguration, there will be no loss of on-street parking along First Street. And then one other element to this project does include an exception for public benefit, and to allow, the code requires a minimum of 5-foot landscape buffer between the edge of a sidewalk and a public street. However, in this case, due to the shallow nature of the lot, it is physically impossible to get a 5-foot landscape buffer and still provide for 2 rows of parking within the parking lot. The applicant did attempt to work with county roads and airports to obtain a 6-foot remnant strip between their property and Foothill Expressway. This would have allowed for a larger, if not full, 5-foot landscape buffer, as well as increased drive aisle widths. However, both staff and Dragers did attempt to work with the county, but the county was not interested in selling that property at this time. So unfortunately, that does leave us with this property, which is shallow in depth in terms of providing for a full double-loaded parking lot loop. So as part of this approval, there is an exception for public benefit to allow for a reduced landscape buffer between the parking lot and First Street. Staff has found that they do meet the intent of that buffer by providing a vertical screen wall, which is similar to the green screen along San Antonio Road. So while it won't be 5 feet in width, it will be approximately 3.5 feet with screening, so that'll meet the purpose of screening the vehicles from the street and also providing a buffer to avoid cars overhanging into the sidewalk. So with that, staff is recommending approval to the City Council, and I am available if you have any questions.
I just have a quick question. So the new addition that they're proposing, that is going to be fully parked?
That is correct.
15. Okay.
Is that what, presumably one of our requirements, one of your requirements, I thought we had an agreement about it, was that there was going to be a photorealistic montage made whenever a new building is proposed. And I realize this is just a modification of a building as an extension to the rear of the building and so forth, and a re-landscaping of the parking lot. I think it would have been helpful to have that. The architectural rendering is fine, but I don't know if I can emphasize this enough. I really, for a new building especially, but even in this case, I would really like to see, that's something that I think all architectural firms can or should do at this point in our little technological development. So I thought the rendering was fine. I didn't have an issue with it, and I certainly don't want to hold up this process because of that, but I just thought I'd make that comment. I don't know if James is on board with that or not. That's something we've talked about a lot, James.
Thank you. So there's two components of our rendering submittal requirements. One is what we've had in place for some time, which is best reflected on the cover page, which shows the new building, in relationship to the newer condominium project down the street. The fact that this was a relatively small addition and primarily a remodel of an existing store, we thought that this exhibit was acceptable. The second component is a new requirement where we're going to start requiring computer modeling, a three-dimensional modeling similar to what Safeway presented to the Commission a couple of years ago. We're developing those submittal requirements, and they will be required for all new projects that are submitted, but that wasn't required of this one, as we're still developing those standards. We've got another project that's in the pipeline at 999 Fremont. We haven't required the computer modeling of that project either, as we're still developing the standard. But anything
You have
that
not required it?
not as of yet, we haven't developed the standard yet for that. We're working with an architecture firm to develop that standard. But the Commission does have the authority to request additional exhibits when that application comes back to the Commission, but that was a project that's been before the Commission a couple of times.
Right.
But anything new that's submitted from today forward will be required to submit that.
I guess my thought is, you're right, this is just a remodel of the building, and the building isn't, there's not going to be a substantial change. In fact, the changes that are going to be made will be a huge improvement to the area, but it was just, wanted to make sure we were on the path to get that taken care of. Thank you.
Yeah, any new application that's submitted as of today forward will be required to submit the three-dimensional computer modeling.
Okay. And, well, in addition, the photorealistic montage.
Yes.
Okay.
Zach, my understanding is the proposal here changes the parking lot from diagonal parking to head-on parking, and with that change, makes the parking lot driveways two-way, with the goal being to allow cars to not create a queuing problem. Am I correct that if, in fact, it was made as a one, or is maintained as a one-way, that because it will be 2 cars wide, that in fact it would accomplish that same objective?
Yes, and I'll defer to the applicant to speak further to this, because I know their desire was to maintain two-way traffic, but yeah, it could be just as functional with a single lane of travel or two ways.
Okay. And
I kind of disagree with that, because I go there all the time,
Well,
and what happens is
At this
someone-
point, we're just
I'm
asking.
just-
No, but let me
staff.
just explain something to John. So what happens is someone stops and waits for a car to back out, and then cars back up all the way on to First Street. So that's the problem with the one-way.
But if there's head-on parking, there's room for 2 cars wide. In theory, that could solve, particularly if somebody's backing up, that doesn't solve anything. But if somebody's waiting for somebody to load the last of their groceries in the car, that in fact would solve that particular issue.
Given the width, one car could pass another, whether it was one-way or two-way, because
Right.
you have 24 feet of width.
Okay, good, thank you.
And I had some questions, and I think I know the answers, but I want to just, so that other people may be listening. So the first thing is that the telephone poles that are currently on the sidewalk the plan is that those are going to be undergrounded as part of that? That's correct. And then second is that because this project was already in the works, the story poles are not required, as the city council is now requesting all applicants to do. Is that correct?
It's similar to the previous question. This project was in the pipeline when that standard was adopted. There wouldn't really be anything to story pole on this project.
Yeah.
But we didn't require it because it wasn't a requirement yet when this application was submitted and accepted.
Everyone knows the story. You don't
Yeah, I
need a
know that.
poll.
I'm like, again, I already know the answers, but I just want to make sure everybody does. And then the other two questions, so when the new crosswalk goes in, it looks like and appears that we're going to lose a parking space on that side. You can actually leave it there, right? The one across the street looks like that, I was trying to look and shift the parking where it is. It doesn't seem to line up. It's not a big deal, but I just want to make sure that that's my understanding.
The parking is being shifted toward Whitney, so you have the same number on that side, but it's
Okay.
shifting down.
Okay.
So it'll be shifting south.
And the last thing is on this diagram on the right side, where the dashed line is the end of the property, and now there's going to be a thoroughfare that goes around, so that, is it Bella? There's an Italian restaurant that's next door to this, that currently they park and they can only go in and out in the same driveway, so the applicant's saying that they will allow the cars to enter into their property? Is that how I read this?
Yeah, this is a vestige, I think it was recorded back in the 60s, of a circulation easement to allow for full circulation. The parking happens there doesn't meet city current codes, but there is parking that goes on. And so what they're doing is they're not changing this, they're not encroaching into this easement. This portion of the property is identified as a circulation easement to benefit the adjacent property. And so the screen wall goes up to the edge of it, but leaves that intact for
Right.
whatever circulation's needed for those other.
Currently, there's a fence there. I mean, if you go back to the slide that you had, the picture, right, well, actually, that one, right? You can see that there's the yellow pole, and these cars actually go in head first.
So this,
So
where
this
this
is-
fence is in more in the middle of the property. The fire hydrant is actually
Where the
closer
end
to
of the property.
corner of the Drager's property. And so
Right.
that fence will move over slightly, so they won't be able to utilize as much of that area, but that area went beyond what that easement designated.
Okay, that's fine.
And one more.
Sure.
So, Zach, you showed a beautiful sign of existing narrow driveways and city parking signs sort of in the middle of the sidewalk. What's the plan in terms of street signage? Because the sidewalk isn't changing, what's going to happen to those signs?
Engineering would work with the applicant during the building permit process to make sure that appropriate signage is replaced. The goal would be to get them as close to the curb as possible to maintain accessibility. But no, the signs would be replaced, and that would be spec during the building permit phase.
Okay. Is there an option of actually putting those signs buried because there's going to be landscape screening between the edge of the driveway and the actual parking? Is there any opportunity to put it there so we don't lose sidewalk width?
I would defer to engineering. It's a very narrow strip right now, and obviously we don't want to impede the ability of the green wall to grow up, but that could be an option. I know they'll look at placement because this is a narrow street and there's parking and sidewalks. They'll place the poles probably on one side or the other, whether it's at the back of sidewalk or curb. Right. They'll be placed to maximize the width around them.
But if it goes on city property, it's not an issue. If it goes on the Drager side of the green wall, is that something we would have to condition as part of an approval process? Just to allow it if Public Works decided it was something that made sense? I mean, I'm sorry I'm being so procedural here, but.
It would probably be something you'd want to condition. I don't know if we would recommend that because of the narrow strip that's already there and the head-on parking. We wouldn't want to put anything more in there beyond the green wall because it is approximately 1.5 feet or 2 feet, I'm not sure the exact width, between the area where the cars need to park in and the green wall. And I think it's always preferable for something like a city sign to be on city property, so there's no issue with access or repair as needed.
Right. And again, I'm just thinking that the pole is, 3 inches in diameter and 1.5 feet, of space for greenage. The shrubbery probably wouldn't miss those 3 inches. I'm just asking because I'm looking obviously, I don't want to do something that hurts the applicant's project. On the other hand, you know, if we don't give Public Works the flexibility, then we're sort of saying to Public Works, you can do anything, but you're stuck keeping it on the sidewalk. And
I would assume you'd probably want to condition it if you wanted to place city streets, or you were encouraging the placement of street signs not within the public right of way.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So now it's the applicant.
I had one other question for Zach. Are we requiring electric car charging, parking spaces, and/or solar panels on the roof?
Solar panels, I'll defer to the applicant if there's space up there to do solar panels. There are EV and low-emission vehicle spaces designated on the site plan. My understanding is for the future EV that they would be pre-wired.
Okay.
Perfect. Any more?
Public comment?
First the applicant speaks, and then we do public comment. Right? So now the applicant's turn. You have 10 minutes to...
I did wonder.
Hello. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Bill Brigham, Field Paoli Architects. I'm just going to tell you a quick little story, and then I'm going to have Catherine Blanner run through the plans. I moved to California from Oklahoma in 1970, and we lived up in Los Altos Hills, and I used to go down with my mom to White Cliff Market. So I became an architect and studied cities. Los Altos became one of those cities I used as a case study because of its small character, small scale, California village character. And I've always thought of this as being an example of that. I've worked with the Dragers for over 25 years. They're a community-based family business, and I'm proud to help make this building better and fit in with the character of the town. So, Catherine?
Zach, do you have the... I'm just going to go through and highlight some of the features on the different plans or the elevations.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. My name is Catherine Blanner. I'm with Field Paoli Architects here on behalf of Dragers. So just a little bit of project background that Zach touched on. The proposed project includes an expansion and renovation to the existing grocery store. We're going to be doing facade improvements, also parking lot improvements that increase the amount of parking. As we mentioned, there will be 15 additional spaces. We're also going to revise the loading area, and the total proposed square footage would be 24,334 square feet. The existing building is 19,712. This is just the existing site plan. I wanted to mention that the adjacent building, the dry cleaners, will be demolished to make room for the addition. We're also going to demolish the existing mezzanine in the existing building. In the current parking lot, during the reconfiguration process, we're going to remove a planter that's actually inhibiting a few of the spaces so that we can gain more of the spaces. And then we're also going to add an improvement to the front of the building with a trellis as opposed to the canopies that are presently there. So this is the proposed site plan, and a few things we just wanted to mention are the 3 sets of bulb outs that are at the driveway and at both crosswalks. So that will increase pedestrian visibility. And the mid-block crosswalk, we will be relocating it and straightening it. It currently crosses the street at an angle. We'll also be doing ADA upgrades to both sides of the sidewalks, including the other side of Whitney Street. And the entire city sidewalk will be replaced as part of the project. We did want to note that There will be no decrease in the on-street parking. As we mentioned, they'll be shifted around a little bit, but the net amount will be the same. So for the parking lot, a few things I wanted to mention are the improved circulation from going from the one-way to the two-way drive aisles. And that will also help increase pedestrian safety, especially with moving the driveway away from the entry. We also want to note that there will be direct access to the entrance from the sidewalk at the mid-block crosswalk. So it'll be an easier entry into the building without going through the parking lot. We'll also be moving the accessible spaces closer to the entry, so it'll be more compliant with ADA standards. We're also including 6 bicycle parking spaces. We're actually going to split them so that 3 are right at the front of the store and then 3 farther back in the seating area. We'll also be doing voluntary seismic upgrades on the existing building so that it increases the longevity of the project or the building altogether. We mentioned that we'll be doing the facade improvements with the stone corners, repainting the existing slump stone, adding some storefront windows along the First Street elevation, create more variation and depth to the entire elevation. We'll be adding skylights, which will help increase efficiency and bring more natural daylight into the space. We'll be revising or adding a new refrigeration system and also making the mechanical system more efficient. This is the north and the south elevation. So I wanted to point out the wood trellis that's at the seating area. We also have a new seating area that will be kind of in the corner of the lot right by the crosswalk to add to the experience to sit outside. For the south elevation, we're revising the loading area and adding kind of a lot of architectural elements for the screening. You can also see in the south elevation that the new mechanical equipment on the addition will be screened, and we've architecturally integrated everything. This is just the northeast perspective, again, showing the entry, the relocated driveway, the green wall fence, and the landscape buffer. So perspective of the southeast, showing the loading area. You can also see the mechanical screening and some of the new windows. So along the east elevation, some of the main points is we will be increasing sidewalk lighting for increased pedestrian safety and the storefront windows that I mentioned, the bulb outs with landscaping to enhance the aesthetic appeal as well as pedestrian safety. On the west elevation that is adjacent to Foothill Expressway, we'll be including a lot of improvements on the county right-of-way to improve the appeal. We'll also be adding the new ornamental fence per the city standards. I just want to point out a little bit about the landscape plan. For the new parking lot configuration, we will be adding a mixture of shrubs and trees in the parking lot to increase shade and visual appeal. Those will be enclosed within parking diamonds. And also wanted to point out the extent of the improvements along Foothill Expressway. So here, just another view of the improvements along Foothill and the bulb outs. And that's what we have.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. If you go back to landscape plan, are there any restrictions, I'm trying to say, are there any restrictions for how high the landscaping can be on that side? I mean, Drager is proposing new landscaping on that front, right?
You're talking about along Foothill?
Mm-hmm.
Our discussions with the county have primarily been based around trees, and their request is that all trees have a setback of at least 7 feet from face of curb to the mature face of the tree trunk. Beyond that, I mean, the goal is lower landscaping, but there's no specific height restrictions. And ultimately, the city does maintain the landscape shoulders within city limits along Foothill Expressway.
So the goal is to have lower landscaping, not higher?
A mix of landscaping, because the trees are the high landscaping, and along here, there are a mix of trees that are already existing. So they would be re-landscaping the middle and lower area, and then, so you've got some along the fence, and then a mixture of lower landscaping along the building.
Can you go back to the elevation where you had the landscaping from Foothill? So are these actual trees, or these are just schematics? Are these the actual ones?
Pretty close to the actual trees, yes. That's showing from the landscape plan. Approximate locations, but they are the same species.
Okay, all right.
Can we go back to the, yeah, I wanted to ask Catherine another question. Can we go back to the parking lot again?
The landscape or just the,
Well, there's an overhead, the previous view, the overhead view of the parking lot
okay.
with the landscaping, actually. So, going to this store, as I do, it looks to me like, I mean, I think it's terrific that you've added more parking spaces, including the additional 15, and kept the original 72 and so forth. But if you look at the driveway, the parking spot to the immediate left of the driveway, that's going to be really tough to get into. And also the parking spots right next to the store, there's a little, for some reason, I'm not sure why it was done, but there's a little green buffer there. Those parking, maybe those are disabled parking spots or something, but those are also probably going to be really tough to get
I
into.
think, is this a, oops. So the one kind of green portion above the two trees
Yes.
that are stacked together,
Yes.
that's the existing sign location.
Uh-huh.
And so we kept a landscaping area there so that the existing sign
Okay.
would remain. It will be refurbished and new finishes.
Sure.
But the structure of it will remain the same.
But are those not parking spaces just to the right of that green area?
Yes, there are two there.
So those are going to be,
You go around and.
yeah, you'll have to go all the way around, and then, yeah, it's going to be really tough. But the one next to the, right next to the driveway is going to be a hard one to get into. It just makes it less useful, I guess. I mean, I know you had to use every bit of space that you could, but,
Yeah, I think those would be spaces where you would have
I'm
to.
sorry?
Those would be spaces you would have to circulate around the lot
right.
if that was the only empty space.
Yeah.
Questions the other side? Renee? So I did have a question regarding the vegetation. This is a great shot. And that is the bulb outs as well as the buffer that's between the sidewalk. Will they be able to have the water run into them and then have like a sunken basin? It's hard to look from the rendering
Yes.
whether you're going to have that kind of effect, but it would.
The bulb outs include the Green Street feature so that water will cut through the curb. So it will kind of act as this stormwater treatment.
When we say cut through the curb. So, because it looks like right now there's like the water goes through the curb. What I'm talking about is there's, Rosita Avenue is a great example of that, where the city has put in a curb, but there's spots so that the water can run through it and land into the land and drain into the ground, rather than going down the storm drains. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Ours will just be a cut in the curb so that the water can go into the planter.
Okay, so it's fine.
It,
Yeah, then we're saying the same thing. It just looks from this picture like it's a.
Just cut through, right?
It's a cut through, right? A cut through to get the water just down to the sewer.
no, that will be all part of the planter.
Okay. That was it. Any other questions? Thank you. I have one public comment. Mr. Wing? You'll have your usual 3 minutes.
I can't see the clock.
Yeah. Zach is blocking.
Yeah, he is. Exactly. I'm Jim Wing. I live on Milverton Road.
First of all, I do support the redesign of the new building, and I'd like to thank Driggers for doing really a very good, from a precedent standpoint, documentation package. I do have some serious concerns on the changing of the driveway location, changing the pedestrian crosswalk, and adding the bulb outs is going to bring congestion back to First Street. And also, there is going to be at least a loss of 7 usable parking spaces. And keep in mind that the 20-feet spaces are very tough to park in, therefore not really usable. So if we go back many, many years, we had congestion on First Street. And it was the standard per code parking that you normally see. And it was basic congestion was caused by the people stopping and backing in. Staff redesigned it to a more open type parking space where you could kind of head on, and the congestion went away. This drawing here and this section here, Whitney to Main anyway, we're going right back to where we are. Bulb outs cost space for parking. Basically, when Planning Commission approved 101st Street, it had bulb outs and lost parking spaces. When council saw that, they turned it around and removed those, and so now 101st Street has added 1 parking space over what the post office had. The changes here, when you look at bulb outs and narrow streets, they really do not add to pedestrian safety. You use bulb outs to reduce the amount of space that a pedestrian has to walk, and this isn't the case here. I walk the crosswalk all the time, and its visibility is the problem. And the bulb out is really kind of for cosmetic only. And even in the driveway, you notice on that radius, there's going to be some black curbs there as cars start to pull in. So therefore, it's going to be a turn difficulty just getting in. And we see that on a lot of our streetscape designs there that have curb radiuses around 16 feet or less type of thing. So I recommend you really take a close look and condition this to really maintain the existing street parking logic because it does work, and we need through traffic circulation on First Street. And the bulb outs, they're cosmetic only. And parking spaces, there's a trade-offs always, cosmetics or parking spaces. And I would vote for more parking spaces and ones that you can use, which are per code and the logic that's used over there now, which is on a 52 feet pitch or so. One minor point. I really would like to see the diseased 22-inch pine tree removed, and the county would also like to see it removed, and I would put in that special condition. Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Wing. So, could you describe the current parking spots are 22 feet? Is that right?
Okay. Well, it's a set. And what it is
there's a red zone between every two.
It's the 222s and then an 8-foot red zone, and that's all the way up and down First Street. And this enables cars, now not the big SUVs, but the average car length in California, it's 16 feet 8 inches and change. Well, it allows them to head on and kind of get out of the travel lane. That was the key design the staff made. Now, this is many years ago. This is in the early 80s when that change was made. And it really does work well. And so, to me, that circulation in avoiding the congestion is really worth serious consideration. And keep in mind, you don't have to relocate the crosswalk. Now, that crosswalk does work in that location. We have a little visibility problem on the east side, but there's an extra red space that we can make that visibility improved. It is a tough design problem because there's a 9-foot pitch for all the parking spaces within the parking lot, and we have a 52-foot pitch on the street,
and how to get those to match to where you don't clip the pitches that much to lose that many spaces. I don't think that has been really thought through in this design in terms of where the driveway is located. Maybe shifting 6 or 7 feet north or south will enable the pitches to match better as you try to lay it out, because it's important you don't lose any spaces. Now, technically speaking, when I wrote my letter, I counted all the spaces between Main and Whitney, and there is a loss of 2. But in this case here, Dreggers has given up 2 loading zone spaces, so Zach's statement is technically correct, but we have lost 2. I mean, when you put bulb outs, you're going to lose something. Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, I'll, not seeing anybody else who wants to speak, I will close public comment. Now the commission comments?
Yep. I got
You wanna
some-
start?
Sure. So I have to, well, a couple of things. I think this is a wonderful project. I think Draeger's is doing the community, well, they're doing themselves a favor, of course, but they're doing the community a great favor. And I like the design. I think it's very nicely done. It's going to be a huge upgrade to the area. So I applaud Draeger's for doing this. I have to agree with Jim Wing. I think the bulb outs are purely cosmetic. I think the right turn into the Draeger's parking lot going in the direction of San Jose on First Street is going to be extremely difficult. I've watched people run over the curb. I can't tell you how many times. You see it all the time in the building next door, which is Voyageur du Temple. There's a similar situation there, and people drive over their parking curbs all the time. I sort of watch them do it. His comment about people stopping and backing up, if you sit out and have a cup of coffee at Pete's, it's almost entertaining to watch people attempt to park. I have actually asked a person to get out of their car, and I would help them park the car, and I park the car for them. I'm so helpful. I just think that Jim has made an excellent point about retaining the additional spots, and if we suffer a little bit, first of all, I think the bulb out for the driveway is going to be very difficult to get around. I know I have trouble with my car in this coming out of Safeway making a right turn onto First Street. I have to make a really wide right turn in order to make sure that I don't whack the curb when I go around. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. So my thought would be I would like to see the bulb outs removed. I love the project. I think it's going to be terrific. I don't want to stand in the way of something that's really needed and going to be a big upgrade, but I would like to see those changes.
Any other comments?
So just, yeah, first of all, I think it's a huge improvement and it's beautifully done. The existing building and enhancing it I'm looking forward to it because, I mean, people do renovations in homes and they work around this old kitchen, and then when everything is done, you look at it and you're like, we should have just gone ahead and changed it. That's what's happening with Draeger's, right? Everything is getting new in that street, and you just see this. So I think it's a beautiful improvement, definitely supporting the project. Having said that, just a couple of things. I know, James, we just discussed about the 3D rendering, and it has nothing to do with this project, but I just want to make sure we pointed out, going forward, we will have projects which will be coming in as remodels and additions, right? And we'll be, Draeger's has done this 3D modeling, but we want to make sure that we are at least consistent so that we are not giving one project a different,
Set of
guideline.
guidelines.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I look at the bulb outs, right? Forget discussing the bulb out, but just the plants in the bulb out route right now, they look like, I don't think that's the actual plantation which is going to be in there. But it would be nice to have it as close to reality as we possibly can. I don't think for some small projects we need to have actual, overall 3D walkthroughs, but At least we should be consistent, I think, what we are asking for from everybody. I do have a couple of concerns and just thoughts, and I don't know if that's something I would like to put a condition or more leave it up to staff to discuss with the applicants. One is I actually do prefer the bulb outs around the walkway, which is the crosswalk. I think it does give a little bit buffer because right now sometimes, especially on this road, if the kids are crossing, people don't stop so fast. And I think just around the crosswalk, I prefer that. It gives a buffer from the cars parked on the street as well. The location of the crosswalk, I think, is perfect because it moves the circulation really nicely, and it actually brings more attention to getting into the space as well as the sitting area that they've carved out. So the bulb outs right at the driveway, I have a question on it, but I'll be very honest, I don't think, even though we do this every day, I would like to depend more on the engineer to see if this is something which is workable or not, to get the cars in at the right angle, and is it too tight or not. So that's why I don't want to put a condition on it, but I would like engineering to take a look at it just to make sure it works. Couple of suggestions, and this is kind of something we learned, or at least I learned, the project we approved at the corner right next to Safeway. Every time I drive by, I wonder why we did not ask for bigger trees. I mean, it'll take 50 years for those little things to grow, and that whole building is just right at Foothill. So I would like to see a little bit more mature trees, or at least taller plantation on the Foothill Expressway side. I mean, it's a beautiful building, but on that side, it is a blank facade. And, landscaping can do wonders. So if we can have something like that, I mean, I really feel for the neighbors who are across the street. I mean, we've had this issue in the past. Thank God nobody's here talking about it. But I think it'd be nice to have some more vegetation around Foothill. I think taller trees is something I would love to see, because I admit, I was not looking at that for the other project, and now I feel like we should have, because it's going to take years for it to grow. The other thing I would like to see is in the existing facade on the First Street. Right now, there's a lot of plantation which goes up, and it's old, but it covers quite a lot of that wall. And if we can go back to the elevation, if you can just pull the flat elevation up on the First Street, right there. This concerns me. I know that we have an existing building, and the play of the stone and the offsets are done beautifully, and there's a rhythm to it. But you have planter beds right underneath those walls. If we could have something that you can work out with the landscape architect to have something growing on the walls, or something which softens this facade a little bit, I think would be a benefit to this project overall, and I think it'll make this project look much nicer compared to what you have done towards the main entrance side. So these are my two main, and I would like to have that. I don't know, I'm open to ideas. I hate putting conditions because, everybody has done so much, and I don't know what the background is, but I really would like to see, maybe at the end, see if they would respond to it, and if they're open to an idea of putting more greenery on this wall and on the Foothill side. That's it.
Ronit, do you want to?
Sure. I concur with both of your suggestions. I like the idea of adding more mature, taller trees on the Foothill side, and definitely increasing the landscaping on the First Street side. I think they do a really nice job of improving the lighting. So what will it be looking at, a blank wall, or will it be, improve the landscaping? So I would say that would be a condition that we should put in. I think moving the driveway makes a lot of sense. I really like the materials. I appreciate the green wall, the texture and the quality of the materials look great. And I actually also like the bulb outs, particularly right at the driveway. So I'm going to be supportive of this project, but I feel like we have to have the conversation about parking to comply with the city's parking regulations, they need to put an additional 35 spots. Now, again, I'm supportive of this project. I'm voting in favor of this project. And I found it compelling that the transportation analysis said that only 8 hours a year does it actually even get above 90% capacity. And my anecdotal evidence from growing up in Los Altos and going to Draeger's many times, and I go there now, I get my lunch there, I do my grocery shopping there. I've never seen it full. And in fact, it has such generous parking that at lunchtime, the folks who are at Voyager next door will sometimes park and then walk over. So my point in saying this is not that we need to, have a hold them to the strict letter of the law. We're obviously not going to. But to suggest that maybe there is a gross error in our code, in that this grocery store is intensive retail use. It requires one space for every 200 square feet, so that's 5 for every 1,000. And they're currently parked at one spot for every 300, so that's 3.3. So currently they are 3.3, and they are doing just fine for intensive retail use. So at some point, and I say this because I'm on the parking subcommittee, and we are studying this in intense detail, and looking at every project that approved and asking, why are we giving variances to projects? Why is there disparate treatment for applicants? Why does Draeger's come and they get a variance for 35 spots, and the next guy comes and he's shy one spot, and we tell him to shrink his building? What are we doing? And so I would say that either we need to revise our code to reflect what the parking needs really are, or we should be consistent in our inconsistent application of the code. I think everyone in this town wants to park projects sensibly, and that's always our objective. But the next time a project comes, and I suspect all of you are voting in favor of this one, I'm going to remind you of the variance that we allowed here, and where for intense retail use, 3.3 was totally acceptable. And just, in doing the calculation, the proposed project is actually going to be parked one spot for every 280 square feet, right? And their argument is that they will be fully parked. And though the code requires one spot for every 200, they're starting at one spot for every 300, they're moving to one spot for every 280, so they're actually improving. But they're nowhere near where they're supposed to be. And I'm gonna beat it like a dead horse, but my point is, where they're supposed to be isn't necessarily what we need. And we should be, we get criticized for treating applicants seemingly subjectively. And I don't want to keep seeing that happen. So I think it's important to at least acknowledge that we're making we're being very generous in allowing this variance for 35 spots.
Go ahead.
So I would prefer to leave a political discussion of what our parking ratios is to the politicians in our city and the subcommittee, and not have it discussed here. So my biggest lament in this project is we're losing a charming chain link fence and the remnants of a dry cleaner operation. And
Wait,
those-
that's a historic building.
Well, it may or may not be historic, but it adds to the charm and character of Los Altos. And for anybody who thinks I'm saying that seriously, I am not. There's a difference between old and decrepit and charming, and hopefully people can recognize it. So, obviously this is a vast improvement in terms of the building and the appearance of First Street, and consistent with our goals as a community of improving the quality of the experience for merchants and residents and shoppers along First Street. So, I think there's an awful lot good to be said about this project. I think the devil is in the detail, and I have 5 points that I would like to address here. One is, I think there's still a question of the parking circulation, and not only one-way versus two-way in the parking lot. Ken, you spend more time at Draeger's than I do. But I think, but you're raising questions about the usefulness of some of the parking spots. And we can debate this, and left to our own devices, Ken, you and I would probably fight about it. But the reality is we don't know. And I would like to see somebody with more expertise look at the circulation, with the goal being to avoid the backups, all right? To avoid the backups, I mean, obviously making the actual width wider so that if it's one way or two ways, people can get by helps, but how it's done, how it relates to where the parking spots are and how you actually get in and out of some of them, I think it's a real question. And it seems to me that it's in everybody's best interest that be addressed. So I would like to see some sort of mechanism in place for the applicant to come back to us, to the city, before this goes to city council, so that we know what this thing is really going to look like, and we have a level of confidence that the parking spots are going to be usable, that the circulation elements are going to work. I was tempted to say that we should do the same thing with the bulb outs, because there are questions about, do we lose parking spots with the bulb outs? I would actually like to propose an alternative. We have seen numerous times in this city where flashing lights work. Why don't we just put flashing lights in, get rid of the bulbs outs, and that way we fix the pedestrian problem and we don't lose parking spots. That would be my suggestion. Number 3, I would like to give the city the flexibility, should Public Works determine that the street signs are best fit on the Draeger's property, that it's a condition of the approval. Public Works says we can fit them on the street, we can fit them on the sidewalk, we can hang them from,
The trees.
the trees. That's fine, but I want to give Public Works flexibility because we're dealing with a very challenging existing situation. And it seems to me that it doesn't negatively impact the project. We've got 1.5 feet of space. We've got a pole that's 3 inches in diameter. It's not going to affect the growth of the trees. Yet it gives the city that flexibility. So that's number 3. Number 4, the suggestions to improve the landscape elements on Foothill and First Street, I agree wholeheartedly with. And Rhoda, even though we may have different perspective on timing of looking at parking, I will tell you, and I'll tell the applicant, that I view this project as a lost opportunity to provide above-ground parking, partially below-ground parking for Draeger's and for the community. And I would, this is an issue I raised several years ago because I think it's a large enough parking area that you could, and configured so that you could put in partially below and partially above parking, and it's a lost opportunity for everybody. And, it's not within my necessarily the purview to force that on Draeger's, but I think there's tremendous benefit for everybody for that kind of discussion to happen.
So, like my fellow commissioners, I really like this project. I think it's great to see new material, new elements, paint, etc. I did have concerns regarding the facades. So much like was expressed previously. When we did the good, the bad, and the ugly, one of the common things was the building that's further down, the condos, was all the same color. And here we're looking at a building roughly all the same color. There are some stone elements. So, I mean, I was trying to look at what could we do to help break that facade up. I know that when we talked about 400 Main Street, we also said we'd like to keep the village characteristics, and that's different colors and paints. I like the idea of having vegetation or trellis. I think the Safeway building's a great example of that on Foothill, where it's growing up faster than I've ever seen plants grow, and it really does look great. So it would be great. I don't know if that's something we need to talk about or condition, but it would be nice to see that. As far as the bulb outs, I have to agree that I like the bulb out at the crosswalk. I think that it gives an element of protection to people, and flashing yellow lights, although they do cause motorists to think, or a raised thing, I don't know how much that would help in that area. I am concerned about the bulb outs at the driveway. I do know that there is a red curb currently, and visibility is what I'm concerned about. And again, I hate to see those things run over. I've seen a lot of people drive, and they do not necessarily drive in ways that you would expect. I actually, at Trader Joe's at Homestead Road, people drive over the vegetation all the time, the curbs, because they just can't see it. So I'm just worried, and maybe that's to engineering, I'm not sure who the right element of is. Like, are those bulb outs in such a way that a car, if it turns right to go down First Street, it's not going to drive right over it?
Or turns from First Street into the driveway.
Into the driveway, yeah. I think everything else, I mean, parking circulation, I thought about the parking element as well and trying to do something, but I think that, they were conditioned a long time ago, and now we're making it better. I think that's a great thing, that we're getting more parking in that area. So those were my thoughts on this. I don't know what...
So,
Can
I do
have
have...
a couple
yeah.
extra things I'd like to see, but go ahead, please, go first.
Just listening to everybody, I personally don't want to see, I would like to see a condition of having looked at the facade on the First Street with more vegetation and because it's an existing wall structure, so you're not expecting them to do much there, but if they can do something with vegetation, and even on Foothill side. I don't want this project to come back to us just to show us that, or the bulb outs. Also, I think, we have a system in place in the city. Once we approve, we all are sitting here as volunteers looking at guidelines and things, but we are not experts. But when they submit to the building, engineering and everybody will be looking in detail on what's per code, how the turnouts is working. I'm guessing you'll have to provide all the radiuses and everything. So, I'm pretty confident we have a good engineering, system in place that they will be looking at it. We can probably put a condition, if you want, that it should be thoroughly reviewed, because we do have, all of us have the concern on the bulb outs right at the driveway. Where the parking is concerned, I agree with Runit. I think I'm actually very glad you brought it up, just so it's on record, because, we do get feedback that sometimes we are being very inconsistent from project to project, and that's why I brought up the 3D also, because we want to be sure that it's not inconsistency. We're just, sometimes you just have to look at it, a project, the way it is. Now, they have had this approval right after I was born. So, that's a while ago.
That isn't that long ago, then, is it?
A while ago. And in current condition, I go to same place. I haven't seen it yet where it's full, except for the pet parade and stuff. It's going crazy. But
Day before Thanksgiving.
yeah, day before Thanksgiving, everything is going crazy. But I'm hoping actually with the facade upgrade and everything, it'll be more inviting to actually go there. But I'm glad that they are fully parked for the new addition. But the old one is, and John, I agree with you that this is a prime piece of parcel. It's like prime rib right in the middle. But it's existing building. And I know it's sad that we won't be able to get our parking that we need for the city, but I think squeezing any more in there, they've already, as we all know, some of the parking spots will be where people will have to go in circles to actually get in. I think you just won't be able to get any more parkings out there. For the flashing lights on San Antonio, it's a busy street. I actually prefer it because nobody stops. But on that first street, it's kind of cute to have those bulb outs around the walkways. It still gives you that village feel, gives you that cozy feel that the kids can just cross over rather than having to, do that. So I personally don't want to see any condition where they have to come back to us because, again, we'll still be looking at the parking from our point of view without the expertise, and I'll rather depend on engineering to be doing that.
So the parking, the circulation or the actual access to parking spots in the parking lot?
I'm guessing both, because even the circulation and the bulb outs will be looked at as
But
from
my
engineering side.
understanding, and maybe Zach can answer this question, if we approve this, will there be any more analysis of either the circulation or the specific access to parking spots? My impression was the answer was no.
Chairman, if I could, before Mr. Dahl speaks, I meant to add this to the conversation. These plans have been fully reviewed and vetted by Public Works, Engineering, Fire. The parking stalls, the drive aisle widths, the access points at the driveway on First Street, they all work. The circulation plan, I think, will be improved over current conditions. I agree that the bulb outs at the driveway are going to make that driveway access point very tight. If people drive slowly and careful, geometrically they work, but it will make it a much tighter turning movement, and that's really the purpose of bulb outs, is to make people drive slower and more carefully. But those could be eliminated. I do agree with the comments that the bulb outs at the crosswalk are probably more valuable because they do shorten the pedestrian pathway and they give you a little bit more of a pedestrian barrier. But the plans have been reviewed. The circulation and dimensions and widths do work.
You have to keep in one more thing in mind, that if even though all of us are thinking it's a tight turn-in, the advantage of the bulb outs is exactly what James said, where people slow down. And sometimes they're talking on the phone and they just turn right without really looking over their shoulder if anybody's crossing. So kind of hesitant to just say that remove the bulb outs.
And I'm less concerned about the bulb outs than I am about the point that Ken's made, which is we've got parking spots which, can't get there from here. You can't get into those spots. You may not be able to get out of them.
Right.
And it seems to me, this project isn't overparked.
That's
Right?
fine.
Nobody's going to claim this project is overparked. And maybe one perspective would be it's underparked by a little bit or it's underparked by a lot. And whether there's historic record to agree with what's been provided here. But if we do what's been provided here and we in fact really don't have 2 or 3 or 4 spots, then we're doing the community a disservice. What I'm simply asking is how do we address that? I mean, is there a mechanism to address it? Because every time our intuition says and all due deference to traffic engineers, the traffic engineers say it's going to work, and we up here say doesn't feel like it's going to work. We've been right. We said, the traffic engineer said, First and Main, it's going to work. Guess what? It's backing up. It's doing exactly what our intuition said would happen.
Common sense. Common sense.
Intuition, common sense. That's where I have the challenge here. Because we know we've got some spots that nobody's going to be able to get into or out of. How do we address that?
Well,
Do we?
can I?
Go ahead.
So I think when you combine the high-volume backup time, which backs up on First Street in the direction of Drager's from the First and Main intersection, with the parallel parking issue that Jim Wing talked about, I think we're doing a real disservice. And, I really want this project to proceed. I think they're doing a great thing. It's going to be a wonderful improvement to that area and to the community. But I think the parking design is really naive. I think again, it must have been done by traffic engineers. The supposition that somehow two-way drive aisles are going to make life easier, I suggest that anyone who believes that go to the farmers market in Mountain View on a Sunday morning and tell me about two-direction drive aisles and how that doesn't back up. I mean, happens to be held in a Caltrain parking lot, and so there will be backups in the parking lot. I think it's unavoidable. There are going to be spots that are essentially not accessible, and then if we add although the bulb outs are nice, I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think it's going to really add to the congestion on First Street. By the way, I do happen to agree that the additional plantings for both the First Street side and the Expressway side would be very valuable, so I should have mentioned that before. I definitely agree with that. But I would strongly suggest we put a condition in that the traffic engineer reevaluate the bulb outs and the parking width, parking spaces along First Street. I just see that as it's going to cascade on us. Every time we make a change to one of the buildings along First Street, it just is going to add, the next thing is going to be the other side of First Street is going to be redeveloped, and pretty soon First Street will become like a Los Angeles freeway. I mean, it'll be a huge parking lot.
James, I have a question, because to me, the First Street parking is really the city's issue, and this is just a project. We're approving the expansion of Draeger's and the reconfiguration of the parking lot itself, but to me, the First Street itself is the public right-of-way, and it's really the city property. So should it be dependent on this?
The bulb outs?
Well, it's dependent on it based on the improvements proposed.
Yeah,
right?
they're
The bulb outs
providing
affect
bulb
parking.
outs.
No, just that the bulb outs affect parking. Perhaps makes the parallel spaces closer together without the spacing that they have currently. The crosswalk movement makes the city has complete control over that, whether we accept those improvements or not.
Okay.
So if I could just
Sure, sir.
add a couple points. Right now, the configuration along First Street is two 20-foot depth stalls, a 9-foot buffer, and then two more 20-foot. The city standard, there are two configurations that are approved and used throughout the city. This one uses, you basically have, for every four parallel spaces you have, 3 are 22, the fourth is 20. So the 9-foot buffer does have 3 feet more for every 4 spaces than this 22, 22, 20, 22. But the traffic engineer looked at it, and the extra 2 feet per stall does provide some ease in getting in and out. The bulb outs also have curved areas, so those do provide for pull-in, pull-out. So it's a shifting of them, but by our calculation, it's a zero-sum game. There's no parking spaces lost along First Street, so it's replacing everything that it's reconfiguring. The bulb outs along at the driveway also serve a purpose which hasn't been mentioned, which it ensures that cars parked along the street are adequately pulled back from either end, which does improve safety, visibility, and cars getting in and out. We can definitely look at those and maybe shrink them down, but they do serve a purpose in providing a buffer between parked cars and the driveway.
My objection to them wasn't that they don't have some value. It's that as far as they stick out, according to the drawing in any way, that it's going to make it substantially more difficult to make the right turn either out of the parking lot or into the parking lot.
And I would second that, in that if you go to the Homestead Foothill crossings, you can see that people try to make that right turn, and they just drive. I mean, I've helped a car that was hung up on the curb.
Yeah,
because
right. I've seen that too. Right.
Did you
drive.
pick the car up?
No, I had to get a jack, and
I was going to be impressed.
but I think that's the concern, that people are going to get stuck.
And we see that. I see that all the time at Safeway, where you come out of the Safeway parking lot right at State Street. You have to make a really wide right turn to get onto First Street, because the curb there is, it's difficult to get around that.
So, Mike, we've got, 5 people and 6 opinions, which may or may not be good. Perhaps we can go through each of the points and see where we have a majority, and see if we can craft something that moves us forward or gets us to a discussion as to how we're going to address where we have strong opinions on one side or the other, whether it's a majority or not. Because the goal is
So
to
do you
come
want to
up
go
with-
through each variance first?
Well, that's my question, because there are 4 things that we
Yes,
have
so
to
why don't we
deal-
go
Right.
just down the list of those?
Is that,
I mean, you can approve them all in one motion, or you can separate them. The conditions would all just run with the project as a
Yeah,
whole.
I would
I
like
think
to
do
talk
it one-
through the issues that
Okay.
we've raised, individually.
You mean like
and collectively.
landscaping along
Yeah.
Foothill?
Right.
We all agree.
Right,
Right.
and so that we know
Additional
which,
First Street.
yeah.
Yeah, there are only like 4 points. We
Right.
Just go on that.
Yeah, but there's questions about the First Street and the bulb out and
Well,
circulation, so it's just,
so let me try to do this in pieces that I see here, that I think everyone will probably agree with. So, and then to
You're
where
an
the
you're an
issues.
optimist.
I am. But the first one is the zoning map amendment, right? 14-Z-01 is to change the zoning for the cleaners from whatever to grocery store. Does anybody have
So
any,
the whole zoning is one, we agree.
Yeah.
does everybody, so do you
Violent
need a
agreement.
motion that we all,
motion to approve,
the zoning
Second.
change?
14-D-03.
we have a motion to approve in a second.
We have a second. Any more conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so that's,
So who was the maker and the second on that?
the maker was
Me,
John,
John, and
second it.
Ronnie second.
The second one is is it the variance?
That would be fine, yes.
Is the 14-V-15?
That's a variance.
And the variance is for,
Why don't we do that last?
is that the parking variance? I don't.
Yes, that's the
That's
parking,
That's
Okay,
parking and
let's-
also.
number of parking stall
Um,
variance.
So then we have a use permit, 14-UP-04. And that use permit is to,
It's for the supermarket itself,
The
the
super-
size. So that the conditions that the commission is discussing tonight
7,000.
really all fall within the design review application.
okay.
I'll approve
Motion
that.
approved.
So, Renee, I don't know, I'm sorry.
So I'll approve that.
So you're making a motion to?
I'll make a motion to approve that
The
condition.
the use,
Second.
second by John. Any more conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I'm sorry, was the variance?
That was.
No, the use permit.
Use permit.
Let's use
Right,
permit.
got it.
Skip the,
Okay.
14
So now we have a design
04.
review. I'm picking these off on the,
Chairman, I would take the variance next because that's really the parking, number of parking stall issues, and then the design application will have
gotcha, okay. So
landscaping,
the variance
bulb outs,
is the
et cetera.
number
Yes.
for the number of parking spots at this location?
Yes.
And it's only for that, not including the variance for the landscape buffer?
that'll be in the design.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
design.
a
That's in design.
exception as part of the design.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I would like to actually move forward and approve that variance.
Okay,
Second.
second. All those no more conversation? All those
Well,
in favor?
I would like to second what Ronit said, that I think that the city and we in particular are going to take some heat for approving a variance for 30 parking spaces. This is not the last we're going to hear of it. I don't want to hold up this project because of this,
Okay.
but I think it needs to go in the minutes,
That it's grandfathered.
Professor.
That it's been grandfathered?
That
That's not
this
my
was a
opinion.
topic
It's been
of-
grandfathered, no. I don't think
a
we can say
topic
that.
of discussion.
Okay.
And that the commissioners were very concerned about it, because this is a hot topic in the city right now.
Right. It is a-
And when we approve something that has a variance for 30 parking spaces, this is not the last we're going to hear of it. So,
35.
and-
Sorry, 35.
And if this wasn't being looked at by the city, I think we would
Right.
want to say that we would want to look at this because it raises a lot of questions.
Right.
I would personally say the fact that this is a renewal of an existing variance.
Right.
Strengthened by the actual analysis
Right.
of the parking is what is swaying me that this is a variance.
Well, plus
that
the
is
new-
warranted.
The new addition is going to be parked per,
Per code.
Per code,
No,
so-
I understand.
right.
So I don't want to, again, I don't want to mitigate what Ronit is saying either, but, you know, we, as in every single project we look at, you know, there is rarely a project where there aren't existing conditions that need to be looked at.
Right.
And yes, we will get heat for this project.
So
Who's the second?
Motion made and seconded.
John made second. Discussion complete. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
So, what is it when you don't, you do neither? Is that an option?
Abstain.
You abstain, but usually the city council likes to know why you were abstaining.
Yeah, you'll get heat for that, too.
Yeah.
You're not going to get off the hook.
Well,
for
I'm
heat.
comfortable because I know it's going to pass, right? And I believe that it should pass.
But if one of us abstains, then at least it's a point made.
I think you should vote, if you are uncomfortable with it, Rooney, and you know it's going to pass, you should vote no. That's what John
No.
does. John knows something's going to pass, and he votes
Here's
no.
the
and
thing.
he
I'm in the
makes-
minority.
My
makes them
point,
vote in the
my
minutes.
point
So-
is, I would want this to pass, even if I was the only person voting in favor, and all of you said, no, we have to abide by the letter of the law. I would say this still makes sense because the parking is sufficient.
Right.
Right.
We're not disagreeing with you.
So
vote yes.
I just want to make, I want our point of view, my point of view to be put on the record in some
course.
fashion. I'm going to vote in favor because I do
I was
think
about to
they are
say, yeah.
parking.
So the
Because you-
motion
you
passes
support it.
unanimously
Yes.
with the commission. I think everybody says the same thing, right?
Yeah,
That
and we
we're
kind
really
of support
concerned
you on that.
that the parking standards seem to be,
Something need to be revisited.
Right.
Well, what we can do is, and we don't usually do this because these are our action minutes, but we'll paraphrase the comments that were made earlier, and we'll put that as part of the motion discussion.
I think that would be valuable because
That's good.
this is a hot topic. You know.
okay. So that only leaves the design review approval.
So,
We have about 5 issues that have been raised.
But I would take those issues as a regular motion, so you can get the issues as part of a motion, and then we can talk through them. And
so do the easy two first. Do the 2 easy ones first, and then we move
We have
forward.
to have one motion that
Yeah, I think
approves the
let's-
whole thing, right?
Yeah, let's do this with a regular motion, and then start to.
Okay, so
I
I
was
would like
crafting the
to.
motion.
So I would like to, and I forgot which number it was. So I would like.
14-D-03.
03, okay. So I would like to move forward to approve 14-D-03 with the understanding and addition of 2 more conditions from my side. One is more vegetation on the facade facing First Street to soften that facade up and really look at kind of heavy vegetation on those walls. And then second condition is along Foothill Expressway to have more landscaping buffer, not just at the lower level, but actually at the, to kind of hide the building from Foothill Expressway as possible. And, sorry, the third condition that I would like to see is have staff and engineering revisit the 2 bulb outs at the driveway entrance and see if the size needs to be adjusted in order to make it a better turning radius to go in, but at the same time keeping the bulb outs, if required, for safe pedestrian crossing and parking at the street.
So can I just make a suggestion to the first amendment or condition you were suggesting? Instead of saying more intense vegetation along First Street, I would suggest we be even more specific and
Okay.
say that we would like to see, more than 25% of the facade, the vegetation reach at least the 25% or the 50% mark, or at a minimum, so that, more can be from 2 feet high to 3 feet high.
That's true.
And if we really want to see those walls
Basically green walls.
generously covered, then we need to be more specific.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Well, a question for either
Sure.
end of this table here. We've often talked about, public art or murals or something like that. Is that an option we should throw out for the applicant? Or should
Actually,
we just look
often-
at strictly at landscape?
When people get asked for variances, they often do a public benefit like public art, right? is a perfect opportunity for one of those to be something.
Yeah, but the one concern I have is if you put public art, it's great when you drive up to it. When you're at the narrow end of the road and you have to crank your neck to really actually see it. So I don't want to put it as a condition, but we can put it as something they can look at, which is a public art, or vegetation which covers most of the walls which don't have the stone on it,
Or the windows.
or of course the windows. Would you be
I thought
comfortable with
Veronique was
that?
talking about the foothill side.
No, I
No,
was speaking of the
she's talking
first.
about
Oh,
the
okay,
first.
sorry.
Because my concern is that if you just condition it, sometimes it's easy. They say, okay, it's a
I think if
condition.
you
We have to put
suggest it,
something.
It's not going to happen, though. If we really want it, then you have to condition it. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's,
I don't know how much of a benefit it is at such a narrow street to actually see the art on the right.
I would express that same concern that as you
Probably.
go down that street, you're
Yeah.
not going to see it. Until
If it was driving up the
Okay.
braggers right behind their sign.
go
that's-
back to the,
Landscape.
I like the landscaping option because
Okay, fine.
it gives something to break that.
So
And
to be
Chairman-
more, yeah.
Do you need it more specific?
No, I was just going to say procedurally, these won't be conditions of project approval. These will be direction to the project before it goes to the city council to incorporate these two measures.
Oh,
The
awesome.
three measures.
Okay.
Awesome.
So they're not conditions, they're,
They're part of the motion to make these changes and
Before
incorporate
going
these
to
into
the-
the plans before it goes to the city council.
okay.
So to be more specific on landscaping, then we can talk about vegetation close to the building, along First Street, where there is no stone on the facade to actually cover more than 70% of those blank facades. It could be something which grows on it or vegetation, and I'll actually leave it up to the landscape architect to figure that out.
Right.
Would that
So
be?
are we talking about conditions now, or we want to get a second and then do amendments? What is?
Well, I was going to get a second, and then we could do the amendments. That's what I've been taught, how to do it.
Yeah, that's-
Okay, so that was the motion. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Ken will second it, okay. Now,
So my pet peeve continues to be the question of circulation within the parking lot and actual access to parking spots, so that, in fact, the 87 spots are actually usable. And, I don't know the right process here to fix that, but I
So,
remain skeptical about
Well, one
a
thing-
traffic engineer saying it's going to work when
well,
I'm
it's,
not
I-
convinced.
well, one
it
thing
will.
I'm concerned about is I don't think, I've heard anybody thought about backing into those spots, which is
Yeah.
what I would do.
I was about to
thought
get
that
to that. I mean, our worst parking spot that we all up here hate is the new Safeway in Mountain View. And I'll use that as an example. Not that this is anywhere close to that bad, but if you're talking about the worst parking spots, I mean, that is, and I drive a beast, right?
Which
And
parking spot are you talking about?
the new
Parking lot,
Safeway, the
new
parking
Safeway
lot.
at Mountain View at El
The
Camino.
ground level one or the one?
No,
ground
the
level.
one right at ground level next to the street. Now, that's really a tight, narrow
Right.
parking place.
Yeah.
But me being lazy, don't want to go up, and I drive a Sequoia, it's huge. If I go around and I find a parking spot, I back into it. So what I'm saying is, for me, the parking is tight. Yes, maybe 3 or 4 parking spots will be tight, but as we talked about, this place is not ever fully loaded, but if it is, there's still a parking spot, and somebody can back into it, or compacts can be parked there. But
That's a good point.
I think it's worth keeping those parking rather than making the others more comfortable to get in. So that's the reason I did not want to make that as a condition.
I would also oppose any condition where we would remove
Right.
parking spots.
To make it easy.
There's no scenario I would go with less parking spots.
And that
the
really
other-
is the only alternative. I mean, I
Right.
think.
Because you can't add any more.
During one of the holiday
I'm
peak
voting for that
periods, if
one.
this lot is full, you might circulate once and come around, and if that's the only spot available, you'll take it. They're not going to be the first taken spaces, but they are available spaces.
And I am not advocating making less parking spots.
No, I was just thinking, looking at it,
Parking
I just don't see physically how they can add more, and they can only reduce it to make some
Right.
comfortable. So that's why I didn't want it to put any condition on that.
I would also just remind us that our parking spots in Los Altos are 9 feet wide, which is as generous as they come. A lot of cities do 8.5 feet. as I've recently learned. So
So
maybe it
anyways,
won't be
that
so
was the
bad.
reasoning for not having that as a condition.
Okay,
So,
all right.
Is there any other-
I'm
Sorry, John.
outvoted, but I'm also persuaded that, you know, we can.
Thank you, John.
okay. Is there any other
Well,
elements?
what did we conclude about the bulb outs or
That-
That
lack
was
thereof?
my
That's part of the
condition.
motion that the staff will revisit that and to,
All of the bulb outs?
before the city council.
Is that
The
right?
ones to,
I
on the
said the
driveway.
one on the driveway.
Pardon me?
Just the
ones-
driveway
We're not going to talk about rejiggering the,
crosswalk?
no, not the crosswalk, using the other bulb outs taking up the space that was
That's at the
previously used
crosswalk.
for the,
But there's only,
No, none of the parkings have been affected. We are still parked the same amount of cars, right? Yeah.
no, that wasn't Jim Wing's point. Jim Wing's point was that the space for each parked car is now smaller than it was before, which means that each parked car has no choice but to do parallel parking.
But
When-
that's what Zach was
But Zach
just
said
explaining us, that it's
for every
3-foot
4
difference,
spots,
but,
they're 3 feet less.
yeah,
So that's less than 1 foot.
yeah. And that's why he's saying the bulb out, the way the radius is working, which, again, I don't know if it's the best
So,
radius.
is that true, Zach?
The existing parallel spaces that are on First are 20 feet long. The ones proposed here are, 3 out of every 4 are 22 feet long, and actually one is 24 feet long. So
Okay.
you are losing the 9-foot buffers, but each space is getting 2 feet.
Okay.
So
Piece-
that's why I
That's
didn't think
fine.
the parking is an
it's not a
issue.
problem.
That-
And
that's
that's why
fine.
I'm just leaving the bulb outs right at the driveway to be
Right.
relooked at, so we
Just-
don't
They
have
they probably
mics.
just need to be
Concerned if somebody
angled
dri-
differently or something.
Okay.
Maybe
So
it doesn't stick as far out in the street or whatever, but just, there's a concern of people driving over them
Just
and having
relook at
other
it
issues.
before it goes to council. So that was the motion.
Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to?
Nope,
Okay.
I'm good.
End of the conversation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good luck.
Yep.
Thanks.
Very nice job. It's going to look really great when it's done.
So,
We'll look forward to the grand opening party.
Yeah.
so the last thing on the, well, the second last thing is commissioners' reports and comments. Let's go to this.
I didn't go any, I didn't need to, so.
Who attended the last city council meeting?
Phoebe? I don't know.
I think it was
I thought John was,
and I looked at the agenda and I didn't see anything.
there wasn't anything.
So I have nothing to report.
It was you.
I do have some interesting info, so I want to just get everybody's feedback once we're done.
So, so city council, you're right, there wasn't anything, I mean, that was involved with it. So, okay. Is there any potential future agenda items?
I don't have an agenda item, but I do have I just want to,
Do you want it on the public record?
sure, why not?
Okay, well, that's,
Did anybody hear the news, what happened in Palo Alto recently? And I just want to know what our kind of feedback is up here on that.
on which thing?
Lots of things have happened in Palo Alto.
Oh, no, this one is big. This is the big, huge, multi-use, mixed-use project that they approved,
I don't know this.
Which one?
which, I
They've approved
forgot
a
the
lot.
name. No, it went to the building. It's in the process of pulling a permit. And somebody appealed. Appeal period was over, went back to council, and council has told them to redesign the entire project. I'm just curious to
Was this
see.
was this the one
this
that was on University Avenue on the corner of Waverly or
I just
something?
got this news this afternoon, so I haven't really looked at where, but it's one of the big projects, and I'll send the link to staff so they can forward to all of you.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious to see, I mean, what is our take on something like that? That is massively,
City of Palo Alto.
okay, that's good to
Don't you
know.
remember when we had one of their planning commissioners?
So is there anything else that anybody want to bring up? Seeing none, I will then close this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.